Hello everyone and welcome to the EVN Disrupt podcast. My name is Zareh Zurabyan. I'm the editor of the creative tech section here at EVN Report. My guest today was Zareh Zurabyan, the head of the Americas division of eLabNext, a European biotech company. We discussed the biotech ecosystem, exciting trends in the industry, and the evolution of biotech startups. Thank you for listening. Zareh, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for being here. Zareh, let's start with a little bit of your background. How did you get involved in the biotech scene?
Sure. So my background is biochemistry and math. I've always had interest in science of anything. You know, I looked at food and I wondered what are the elements of this bread that I'm eating or this cucumber that I'm eating, you know, whatever it was. I kind of always wanted to get to the very bottom of what that is. So because I had this interest, I went to college to pursue that. I did biochemistry and math. And when I graduated, I started doing research in biofuels and bioenergy, working with anaerobic bacteria. And as I was doing this research, maybe 2-3 months into working there, the lab manager left the company. And it was around a 100-person lab. And me being an ambitious young graduate, I said, hey, I'll be the lab manager.
Right.
And they said, okay, let this kid have fun until we hire an actual real lab manager. Luckily, I had a background in managing the whole science building at my college, at Regis College. So I took on the job in a very short period of time. I started doing very well, building a lot of great relationships with our vendors and different people, and started doing projects that I was spending about $1 million a week on the whole scale up of our bioreactors. And this little transition, this transformation that I had from doing research to being more focused on business management of things helped me or planted the seeds for me to transition from research to more business development, operations, and business growth.
I'm curious about how you made that decision to transition, because I think a lot of people from STEM backgrounds, both whether they're engineers or they're in a more like research scientist role in a lab, sometimes when they have to make that shift to something that's on the business side or even just sort of a managerial type position, they fear that they're going to be left behind from the actual like development of the tech and the advancement of the science and stuff. Did you have any fears like that, or was it a really natural feeling for you? Of
course I had fears. Yeah. I mean, it's a big move that you're doing. I even took a pay cut in the beginning, so your quality of life also might go down for a period of time. But you have to think about what is your goal, not just tomorrow, but 3 years from now, 5 years from now, 10 years from now. And when you have that vision and you believe in yourself and you know what you like and what you don't like, then you take the steps to do that. So one of the things that I tell younger folk in the industry is that you have to pay your dues in what you're doing, and that's the mindset that I had. I have an immigrant mindset in US, and I know that I have to work my way up to different positions and different things. And the mindset was, okay, I need to make a transition to business, and I don't have a business background. I only have business acumen. I understand it. I enjoy it. But I do not have a certificate. I don't have a degree. So what do I do? And it was a very kind of strategic move, and I got a certificate that planted the seed and gave me some credibility for now companies to look at me. Then I started taking classes at Harvard in business management. That gave me more credibility, and little by little I was able to build my confidence, build my knowledge, and be recognized by the industry in a way that now I'm not the one that's reaching out to be hired. Now they're reaching out to me to hire me. You. Right. Yeah. And this is something that, for any of the listeners to kind of to think about is nothing comes in one day. If you have a vision, if you enjoy something, if you like something, then work, have a game plan and work towards it. And that's how I did it. Right.
Rome wasn't built in a day.
Right.
As they like to say in Armenia, Moscow wasn't built in a day. Okay, that's fascinating. So let's explore the biotech scene a little bit today.
Sure.
Biotech is a topic that is much, we hear about a lot more in the news today than I think we did maybe 5 or 10 years ago. How do you evaluate the biotech scene today, and what are the different sort of sub industries in it that we should be following?
Sure, yeah. So the biotech scene, well, first of all, I'm in Boston right now.
Right.
And Boston is the
Which is
biotech,
like the hub of
right?
biotech.
It's the biotech hub of the world. You know, all of the universities that are there, they spin out a lot of companies, Harvard, the Harvards, the MITs, and so on. You know, there's biotech companies that are, you know, startups from incubators like Lab Central, Biolabs, Smart Labs, and all these places. They will have anywhere from 2 people all the way to a couple of hundred people.
Yeah.
Then there's the pharma industry, the big pharma, you know, the Pfizers and Novartises and Sanofis of the world. Then there's a lot of healthcare, you know, hospitals that will have their laboratories, government labs like CDC and so on. And all of these labs, they do series of different operations.
These are wet labs.
These are wet labs, yes. I mean, even labs that do physics and working with conductors and so on, they are still a customer of ours. We'd still look at them as a wet lab, even though there's nothing wet in there.
Right.
But essentially, all of these labs are either doing research, they're either doing diagnostics, they're doing process and development until they get to a maturation that allows them to do production of whatever they're doing. And then from that point on, they will have both the research arm of the company and then the company and the arm of the company that does the production of whatever they're working on, whether it be a device, whether
Right.
it be a drug, a service, some kind of a therapeutic service, or, you know, whatever. So to your question, as far as kind of what the scene is like, yeah, very competitive, very innovation driven. And the reason why I mentioned that is because there are certain companies that might have an amazing product. They might be, you know, they might be successful on a smaller level, but because the competition is so strong and the way that some of the things get pushed to the front of the industry, a lot of other great companies might fall back, even though they have a better solution or something like that. So it's interesting seeing how all of these things play out. Mm-hmm. And I am lucky that the nature of my job is I'm in the forefront of all of these companies and I work with all of them because of the product that we provide. And I get to see firsthand how these companies battle through the competition to get to the top and,
right.
and be able to be recognized for their innovations.
Right. So let's take a look at the biotech sort of life cycle. You have traditional wet labs, which are typically in either government research institutions or universities and things like that. Mm-hmm. And then you have a biotech layer, I guess, which is companies that build services or build technologies mm-hmm. that wet labs use in order to accelerate their research. Mm-hmm. Is that a good way of understanding
Sure,
it?
yep.
Yep. Okay, so what are some examples of sort of biotech products that we may even be interacting with or are used in some products that we interact with that we don't know about?
Sure. One quick distinction I would make is that when we say biotech, it can be both the company that provides products to right. the research lab. Also, the actual research lab itself is part of the biotech industry.
So the biotech companies themselves could have labs?
Yes, but okay, so let me give you an example. Let's say Moderna.
Yeah.
That's a biotech company.
Right.
But Eppendorf is also a biotech company that provided centrifuges, pipettes,
right.
and you know, automation products to Moderna in order for them to be able to create the vaccine.
Right.
So both are part of the biotech industry, but one provides the devices to the other that provides the therapeutics. These are all part of the same kind of industry. There's not really a distinction, like a terminology distinction in the industry. Everybody just says, okay, it's just biotech.
Right.
So can you remind me your question again?
Sorry.
Yeah,
I was just curious about how all that fits into sort of the biotech life cycle. Like
okay.
what each
Yes.
role,
So
what's the role of each player is. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's actually very interesting because the speed at which these companies become successful or it has changed dramatically. Before it would take several years. Now within a year it can really go big. I have customers that when they start out with us, it's 2 people, and then by the end of the year they have 100 people within the company. Some of it, I think it's not healthy. When you hire so many people in a short period of time, you don't develop tribal knowledge. There's a lot of chaos internally, and you're not building an infrastructure, but you're kind of just throwing money at a company and trying to go big. But I mean, a lot of companies work that way, and then they're able to stabilize. But anyways, there is a lot of incubators, especially in Boston. Just to name a few, there's Lab Central, there's BioLabs, Smart Labs. There, Johnson & Johnson has incubator spaces. Nestle Health Sciences has incubator spaces. And that's kind of a place where you incubate these startups with few people who are doing their research in Erlenmeyer flasks and small scale. They generate a lot of data. They maybe work with a CRO to do some of the analysis, so they don't have to do it in-house.
What's a CRO?
Contract research organization.
Okay.
CROs can be in different formats. It can be the labs that they have the mice, they have the rabbits, and you send them your product and they test it out on them and they give you the results. But then there can be CROs that do the actual data analysis. You generate the data, you send it over to them, and then they do the analysis for you instead of doing it internally. So all of these incubators are really this amazing atmosphere because everyone has something really cool that they're building. They're all passionate. Some came from academia, some came from other big pharma, and they all come together under one roof with a lot of coffee and a lot of beers on Fridays, and they work together and they try to figure out the next big therapy that they're working on. Usually on average it's about 3 years until they graduate. For example, Lab Central, they have a limit and it's 18 months. If you don't have your hypothesis, if you don't have your product, you're out. Other places it's, hey, as long as you pay us, you can remain in this incubator space. Some incubators will provide you with a lot of guidance, mentorship, and potential investors. Others will not. It all depends on the circumstance. But on average, it's about 3 years. These companies go from few people to maybe 20, 25. And then this is when you could consider them somewhat of a mid-level, mature biotech company that now go onto their own. And then for the next 3 years, you see this big boom from 25 people to a couple of hundred. And that's the general life cycle that we notice. A lot of companies fail and, they get a lot of funding in the beginning. And if they don't manage their funding right, they end up buying all these expensive instrumentation. And then next thing you know, they don't have a product. They don't have something. Some will work on a particular, not to name the name of the company, but a particular company was working on, I forget exactly what it was in the beginning, but during COVID, they switched over their formulation and they started working on long COVID symptom. No, not diagnostics, actual, those noon electrolyte, like things that you just throw in the water, it fizzles like a vitamin. They developed something like that for long COVID treatment.
Really?
Yes. And they did it like this in just in the heat of the moment, they were able to transition. So you see this a lot in the scene as well.
When you were explaining the role of those accelerators and those incubators, it really highlights for me the importance of universities in a startup ecosystem, and especially for a biotech ecosystem, or really deep tech startup ecosystems in general, because you can get together a few engineers and some new grads who are really enthusiastic about working on this problem. But if you don't have that deep expertise within your ecosystem to guide you and mentor you on getting your product to market, it's super difficult. And we'll get to Armenia's ecosystem soon, but it really highlights how important it is to develop the universities in Armenia to the point where they can provide that level of expertise for our startup ecosystem.
Absolutely. And again,
I'm sure it's no I was just going to say it's no accident that Boston is a biotech hub.
Exactly.
Harvard, MIT, BU, and
exactly. There's a school in every 5-mile radius, and they have a lot of funding. They're able to afford all of these amazing instrumentation. A couple of mass specs, HPLCs, and a flow cytometer can easily be $5 to $10 million. You can't help but to learn learn from just being in those labs.
Right.
And as you're doing your, daily routine in the lab, pipetting and doing all these things, you start developing new ideas, you start developing new thoughts. You notice that, hey, actually, I can do the same thing way faster if I had a gadget like this. And you have an engineering background. Next thing you know, you're teaming up with someone from MIT and you're building a new gadget.
Yeah.
And, these people get easily funneled to all of these big pharma companies and biotech companies,
right.
and you're seeing this happening actively day in and day out.
Yeah, you saw the same thing with machine learning 5-6 years ago.
Right.
Tell us a little bit about what biotech startups or what type of problems are they working on today?
It can be anything from rare disease treatment to common disease treatment. The focus is to just make people healthier.
Right.
And that's the number one focus. And when I'm interviewing people, when I'm hiring people on my team, including people who are not, let's say, in sales or marketing, even the developers that I'm looking for, I really want them to understand what we're doing and what our mission is, which is we're here to make people healthier. We're here to make this world a healthier place. And that's essentially what it comes down to. That's what biotech is, what health tech is. It can be something that is of great interest, like, let's say, Alzheimer's, or it can be something that the founder, was inspired by having someone in the family who passed away from something, and they were a scientist. They became a scientist maybe just for that, and now they're trying to find a cure for that particular disease. So we see a full range of these. Labs that are coming out of healthcare institutions like hospitals, that's a bit different, because then, different institutions focus on different things. One is, cancer research. One is, something else. And labs out of there have a very specific focus and in a very specific topic. So you will see that as well.
Right.
More, government agencies, a lot of them are focused on climate change, or they're focused on overall health of the society.
Climate change falls under biotech?
Yeah. I mean, the labs, for example, we have a lab that goes into the rivers and takes samples of salmon. And they test the salmon and they try to see the health, how they've changed over the years, their size, their heart, their, all these different things. We have labs that are doing expeditions worldwide, and they go on, 1 month expedition into the ocean, and they take samples of different kinds of fish over there, and then they do testing on it, or the algae, or the coral reefs, and so on. And that's another kind of thing that makes me happy to go to work, because then I know that the product that I'm providing to these labs is directly helping us to understand planet Earth. That hopefully will impact certain policies that will make us healthier and better and safer for the years to come for our children and so on. So, there's also, especially during the pandemic, it was keeping track of, let's say, all the different demographics, how they are getting sick, what are the symptoms, what are the differences, and being able to find therapeutics based on that.
Yeah.
We had a lab at Harvard and MIT Broad Institute that was doing research on Ebola. So you get to see this and that's probably one of the things that I really like about my job. And to your earlier question about the transition from research to the business side of things, if I stayed in research, I was only going to work on anaerobic bacteria, and I would have been a really good microbiologist.
Right, but it's very narrow.
It's very narrow, and I mean, to each their own, and nothing wrong with doing that. But I get to kind of see a wide range of different things. I'm not a specialist in microbiology. I'm not a specialist in chemistry, but I have general knowledge that and it allows me to dip my toes in different topics and kind of just see what's happening in the world.
Right, and you have the sufficient background to be able to keep up with the developments in each of those subfields.
Yeah.
So to a layman like me, it kind of sounds like what we used to just call bio research, I guess, or just the bio industry has just become biotech. Is that kind of very oversimplified, or
no, that's correct. That's correct. I mean, we kind of just refer to this whole industry as biotech. I mean, you can create these sub terms, health tech and biopharma, or just pharma or chemtech, and so on. But at this point, we're noticing that it's all intertwined. It becomes a very multidisciplinary kind of environment. Traditionally, a pharma lab will have their bio team, and then they would have their chemistry team, and then they would exchange data. And because of that, there would be loss of data, and there was a lot of decentralized issues because of that. Now we're seeing much more collaboration, interdepartmental collaboration, and because of that physical shift that's happening, now the term, the overarching term that everyone refers to, is just say biotech. Yeah. I'm in biotech, and that's
Do things like sort of wearables and stuff that give people more personalized data about their health fall under that umbrella as well?
No, that would probably kind of still be health tech, because then there isn't really any research happening there.
So that's the key component. It's the more like scientific research aspect. Got it. Okay, let's talk about eLab, the company that you work for. What are the problems you guys are trying to solve?
Sure. So we are a digital lab platform that houses many different kinds of tools like LIMS or ELN. LIMS stands for Laboratory Information Management System. ELN stands for Electronic Lab Notebook. And all of these tools that we provide essentially helps to optimize the efficiency of the labs, make them more secure, more compliant, and most importantly, the main key pain point is just efficiency, to make labs more efficient. For example, let's say you are a lab that takes a sample of blood. You need to, let's say, centrifuge that down, isolate the DNA, RNA, protein. Then you need to do all the different kind of tests to all these different elements. You need to use different kind of equipment to do these tests. And all of these needs to be noted in a compliant way in case if you need to apply to FDA approval, or maybe OSHA comes, a regulatory organization comes over to your lab and says, hey, let me see all of the samples that you have in this freezer and all of the work that has been done to these samples. You need to be able to provide that information. So we essentially provide this platform that allows you to do these things. But then on top of that, we try to, the reason why we are called a platform is because we create an ecosystem where you do all of these things, where it makes you available to be more AI ready, data science ready, data analysis ready. Exactly. And that's this age. 5 years ago, I would spend more time educating people on what lab digitization is. Now I spend more time educating people on how to digitize in order for you to start using AI and any other solutions or software out there for you to analyze your data and get to the results faster than we did before.
So you guys kind of manage the data pipeline for biotech companies.
Exactly.
Because unless you have a proper and healthy data pipeline, you can't actually apply AI solutions to those problems.
Exactly. And in the industry, there are certain software, we call them data dump software. We are not that. It's not just a platform for you to just dump your data in.
It's not just collecting data.
Exactly. It's in a way that you structure it, and you also do workflow optimization in the process. You automate certain things. And all of these things together then give you, let's say, the end result at the end of the quarter, where now you can take that data and maybe use some of the internal tools to analyze, or send it out to another company, or give it to your data scientists within your company to do the further analysis.
You mentioned a product earlier that kind of sparked my interest, that a digital lab notebook. What exactly is that? Can you tell us about that?
Sure. So traditionally, this is a very interesting topic because we all have been writing with pen and paper our whole lives. We still do. And if you think about it from an evolutionary biology perspective, we've been writing for, some of us, for thousands of years. I was just in Western Armenia, and I saw all of the engravings on the rocks, and I think it's something that's in us. We always want to use our hands to...
it's intuitive.
Right. And now we've kind of come and we're saying, hey, don't do that anymore. Make it digital. So, of course, there is a resistance to change and all of that. But essentially what an electronic lab notebook is it's a notebook, it's a journal that it's electronic, that has a lot of different tools within it that allows you to harbor the data.
Yeah.
For example, we have embedded Excel, we have image sections, we have text sections, and the file attachment sections, etc. And essentially, you take note of what you're doing in the lab, how you're doing it, and you put your results at the bottom of it, usually traditionally, and so on. And you build your database, your IP. This is your intellectual property, and you're building that out. And you don't know how that data might be used in the future. Whereas traditionally, if it's in notebooks, it's somewhere in the basement, and you have hundreds of these, and
it's not searchable.
It's not searchable, and so on. So that's essentially what it is. And
one of the things I'm super interested in the AI space is AI for scientific discovery. And I think the more and more these labs digitize their workflow processes and start not only recording things digitally, but having some sort of tooling that really does a lot of that scientific work in some digital system, creates opportunities for then machine learning engineers and scientists to come and take that data, the data of how people really do that workflow, and try to build systems that mimic human scientists. So once you have all that data of how a scientist records their data, analyzes it, what they do with it, an ML system could, in theory, learn from that and try to replicate what a human scientist could do. But since it's in a computer form, you could really accelerate the pace of scientific discovery by having these systems do a lot of that groundwork.
Absolutely. And I mean, let's look at a direct example. If you're working with microscopes, you are developing thousands of images. Some of these microscopes create this thing called Z-stack images. And that can be, several terabytes of images. Traditionally, you would have to sit down and use your eyes to look through all of these images and then try to see, let's say, just a very simple thing. Let's say the tumor growth or some kind of bacterial colony that you're growing, and you're trying to see a pattern. And that can take you days. And this is how most people did. That's how they did it for the longest time. Now there are tools out there, for example, Modicus Prime or Pipsqueak AI. And Modicus Prime is from here, from Armenia. And you are able to just feed those images, annotate and show what you're trying to look for. After 20 images or so, this is for MP Vision, for Modicus Prime specifically, after 20 images, it has about 98% accuracy. Not to mention that now if you do a couple of thousands of those, it's just going to keep on getting better and better and better.
Yeah, absolutely.
And now the thing that you were going to spend about 3 months analyzing, you're doing it in a couple of days. And to me, that's fascinating. It's exciting. The problem in the industry is that there are a lot of AI tools out there, but they don't have the history to back up their credibility because not a lot of labs are ready to give their data to an AI tool. I think the way that this will start is with things that are not related to, let's say, demographics and so on, because then you're going into the ethical questions and so on, and people are kind of scared of that.
It'll be more generic.
It will be very generic things, and we will start building some success stories and so on until people feel more comfortable into giving their data to these amazing tools that are out there.
I think a lot of that early success might come from large tech players like the Googles of the world, who are financially interested in proving that this works. Like, I know Google does a lot of stuff with quantum chemistry. I think they did some early drug discovery stuff before a bunch of startups and stuff started popping up. Do you think some of those early successes in terms of really doing something from 0 to 1 will come from startups, or will they come from more established players? Or even universities, maybe.
I mean, I think it's
before that trust is built.
It's going to be all of the above until the culture and the approach is already at that level. Defined, yes. Because I know of large pharma companies that are already implementing AI tools. But there's always the human component that is managing it and so on. It's not like a complete trust in AI analysis. We know a lot of labs, biotech startups that, 5 or 10 people that have now their bioinformatician coding an AI tool that will be an in-house analysis of their own data that they collect. Like, for example, with that, there is more trust in that, and this can help to shift culture. Whereas if you're a big pharma company, you're most likely outsourcing it, or you're buying off another AI company and making it part of your big ecosystem. But if it's being built from ground up with the startup mentality, then this will be a bit more trusted, and it will shift culture, in my opinion. So I think it's the combination of all of these things happening at once until, now, for example, we see all of the new startups, biotech startups, they have a bioinformatics team right from the beginning. Whereas before, they would be hired after a couple of years of developing data. Now is right from the beginning, so they can help to define the digital strategy of the lab. And I mean, this is a huge transition in the industry. I mean, it's a very new development. And 5 years from now, this is how people in college will be trained. This is the mindset that they will be in. And I think at that point, it's just going to be a common scenario.
Right. Okay, I want to get to the Armenian ecosystem, but before that, I'm curious a little bit about sort of the economics of biotech companies. So it makes sense to me how sort of biotech service providers and those types of companies make money. But I often see companies with a lot of financing who are, narrowly focused on finding the cure for some disease, right? Like, I'm sure there are biotech companies working on Alzheimer's or other neurodegenerative diseases. How does a company like that, because I mean, that's like maybe a 20-year bet, and maybe it won't even work out. How does a company like that sustain itself financially until it brings some therapeutic to market? Is it just by constantly raising money? It seems so risky compared to other startup financing.
No, this is a great question. This is a great question. There's different ways. One is, of course, the funding. There's like
just raising investments.
Just raising investments and doing that. Now, what a lot of these labs do is they have a diagnostics arm because they've paid for all of these instrumentation. Might as well put it to use. So they will have a service arm and they will have their research arm.
So they generate revenue.
Yes, and it becomes like a self-feeding pipeline. So that's a very common practice these days.
So the diagnostic side will finance the research.
Exactly. Yeah, they will kind of have like a core lab. It's called core, and they have those HPLCs and mass specs, and they've paid all millions of dollars to get this in. Might as well start doing some of this diagnostics for other companies,
and charge
them for it. So that's a very common thing that labs do these days.
Right. Okay, let's get to Armenia. How do you evaluate the Armenian biotech scene? We have a few startups now. What's missing? What could be done to accelerate the growth of biotech here in Armenia?
Sure. So first, I'd like to say that the biotech scene is almost inexistent in Armenia. However, it's ready to boom and grow big. And there's already a lot of efforts in that. And the reason why it's not as mature is because the country is poor and it cannot afford wet labs, basically, because wet labs is right from the beginning is $5 to $10 million for you to set it up. And our universities don't have that kind of money. However,
we don't have wet labs at any of our universities.
No, we do, but it's very rudimentary.
Right.
We have amazing scientists, theoretical scientists, application scientists, and so on. So we have the talent, but we do not have the funds to have a big operation and be able to, let's say, build a core lab here that can get customers from all the local countries like Georgia and Persia or Iran or in these other places. So because of that, we also have we've always had a strong physics background. We've had a strong engineering background. This was called kind of like the Silicon Valley of the region, right? During Soviet times, Armenia has developed a lot of great mathematicians. So now what we're seeing is that the math aspect of biotech, let's say, developing, and those are the AI folks, those are the people that are the data scientists and so on. And a lot of these guys will either have a bio background or a chem background, but they're not really hands-on scientists. They're more theoretical scientists because there hasn't been a lot of wet labs here. But now you combine the mathematical background and the coding. Now you have these amazing talent here that's ready to take their knowledge and apply it to a wet lab.
Right.
So now the things that we're seeing that's happening is we want to build some CROs in Armenia that will take data from US, from Europe, from any of these rich countries that have the wet labs, but they do not have the ability, the time, or it's more cost effective for them to outsource the data analysis to another country like Armenia, who has the talent and has the abilities.
Right.
So that's one thing that's developing, is the data analysis portion of things. And then the other thing is developing, because we have a lot of great startups here in all of the fields. We have a lot of developers and so on. Now we're getting biotech software developers like Modicus Prime that does image analysis. And I think that's really the future here, is focusing on that, focusing on software, because we have the talent. And then once these things get developed, then to close that ecosystem, maybe there will be a wet lab arm that will support this. Right. But first, the funding and the money needs to come in. The clients need to develop. The names need to be kind of spoken of in the industry to build the credibility. And then I think it will naturally grow from there.
And maybe those startups, as they grow and have more capital, they'd be the ones financing wet labs.
Exactly, and I think that's a healthy way to go about it.
Yeah.
Imagine Modicus Prime gets 100 new clients. They get all this funding. Now they can go ahead and work with Olympus, Nikon, and Zeiss, and buy all of these expensive couple of $100,000 microscopes. Then you get the amazing scientists from the local universities who know how to work these microscopes, and now you have the full pipeline here. The customers will send you their samples. Yeah. You will get the images from it. You will analyze it, and you will give the full report back to them.
Maybe this is a very hard question to answer, but what's the average sort of initial financing needed to set up a proper wet lab?
I would say you can start with $2-3 million. You can set up a pretty decent wet lab. It really depends on what you're specializing in. You don't have to have a mass spec and an HPLC in a lab. It can be just purely a basic microbiology lab. Yeah. And for that, with some PCRs, you are able to provide the most common services that somebody would need. So, I think a couple of $1 million, you're able to set that up. Why do you want to set it up?
Not yet. But what I'm curious about is, so there's a lot of talk now about more government financing for science and R&D in Armenia. Do you think it's a good idea or to be putting some of that money that is going to be allocated into opening up wet labs and more wet labs in some of the universities or maybe private institutions, or is it too early in the ecosystem still?
I think it should be all of the above. Again, I think only focusing on one aspect, I think it's kind of similar to like it's not. Fast Foundation, as you know, is working. They're creating the life science incubator space. There will be about 4 companies that are starting from there. And then if at the same time there's also, let's say, investment into the university lab, and we build that and develop that, and then maybe there's a CRO company that is just purely only focused on the capitalistic nature of it and comes and builds some kind of a company out here. All of these things will start creating an ecosystem, and the competition will start kind of dictating the pace and
what's needed.
Exactly, and there will be more and more people going into school for science, so they can be part of that ecosystem. So I think all of these things at the same time can happen, and should happen.
Yeah. Okay, let's get to some of the stuff you do for Armenia's startup ecosystem that is not just limited to biotech. I know you do a lot of mentoring here. Mm-hmm. Tell us about how you got started doing that and what your approach is.
I've been, I did my master's in Harvard, and I was lucky to have some really good teachers that they did workshops that were very animated and very interesting. Yeah. One of the things that one of my professors did was he came into the class with this big rope. and he just started cutting the rope into pieces and giving it to every student, and everyone was just thinking, what the hell is this guy doing? What is this? And then he told a story. He said, okay, imagine you are walking on a bridge. Somebody gives you this piece of rope and then jumps off the bridge, and you notice that now the rope is around their waist, and they're hanging, and now you have a choice to either pull them up or let them out. You try to pull them up, they're not collaborating with you, they're not working with you. You say you want to drop, you will drop them, they say no, don't do it. What do you do in this situation? And of course, this is a philosophical exercise, and we can talk about that for days. There was another workshop that he did that he came in, not the next day, he came in with socks for everyone. He just passed out socks. And again, we're like, okay, let's see what this is about. And it was about a coach. I think they called him the Shark. This was a basketball coach. And they asked him, what is the most important thing about winning championships? And he said, your socks. They say, why? Because if your socks are not high quality, or if they're wet, if you don't take care of it, you will have blisters, your feet will hurt. If your feet will hurt, you will not be able to run fast, jump fast, and you won't be able to win championships. And that's kind of the philosophy of focusing on the details and making sure that everything is in its best kind of condition. Anyway, so these very live and animated workshops really inspired me, and I realized how these two stories are going to be with me for the rest of my life. And I wanted to take elements of that, and being knowledgeable in what I do and successful at what I do, I wanted to translate that into different kind of workshops and mentoring labs here, companies here, startups here, for them to be successful as well. So that kind of started it. They gave the spark. And what I do usually is it's kind of like a brand workshop. The word brand, I don't like the word brand, because usually people just associate it with the logo and colors. When I talk about brand, I'm talking about your essence. I believe every person has a brand, and some things are just unexplainable. You just assume that this person is this because of how they carry themselves, how they speak, and how they dress, and what kind of language they use, etc. So in this little workshop that we do, it's usually kind of like a 2-hour in-depth questioning of, why are you doing what you're doing? Who are you? Why are you even doing this? What is special about your company? What is not special about it? Who are your competitors? And it almost becomes like a psychoanalysis of the company and the founder and their approach to it. Are you here just to end up in Silicon Valley and make millions of dollars? Are you here to change the world for the better? These are the kind of things that I focus on. And at the end of it, I give them usually a 2-3 page report on very specific things that I think they should work on. Maybe it's their pitch. The story needs to develop. Hey, for the first 3 minutes, you need to focus on this, the next 10 minutes on that. And, I get extremely detailed on what I think should be done. My opinion is not the golden rule. It's just meant to challenge and provide a different perspective, and in the process help them to develop an infrastructure for their company, as far as, okay, how many people should you hire in the next 6 months, in which fields, what kind of sectors of the industry should you focus on if you're trying to do market entry in US versus in Europe, what kind of language should you use in your marketing if you're selling in Germany versus in Canada. These things are very different from country to country, and this is not just something that I'm doing with companies in Armenia, but this is an internal thing at our company that we're doing as well, because different cultures and in different ecosystems demand different language and different approach, and it's important to notice those things and take advantage of that, and most importantly do it with passion and love, because if that's not there, then this is at least my opinion, if you're not passionate about your product, you will never be able to be successful with it, regardless of how cool the technology is.
It would also make it harder to accept that feedback in a positive way.
Exactly.
So you come from a very mature startup ecosystem, Boston. and just the US in general. From a cultural perspective, what are some of the key things that Boston and the US have learned over decades that we haven't yet learned here and we really need to export and bring that here?
Sure. I think there's a couple of things. One of them, I think, in Armenia, because we've had several unicorns, people are very attracted to that. It's either all or nothing. Yeah. We either going to be a $10 billion company or nothing. But there's a lot of companies out there that make a couple of $1 million a year, and they're very happy and they're very successful. In order to be a couple of $1 million company, you need to build a method to your business. You need to build an infrastructure, and these are the things that might not be fun for founders, because it takes work, it takes a lot of meetings, it takes a lot of training and development, and there might be a couple of years of no funding, then you get a fund, etc., and it's a pain in the ass. However, if you stick with it, you can have a very successful company that maybe is not a unicorn right now, but maybe 10 years from now, it will be a couple of hundred person company, and you'll be making a lot of money. So I think in US, in particular in Boston, people are perfectly fine with that because they understand the nature of things, and not everybody's going for that big kind of thing. And I think this is the influence, or maybe the word propaganda is wrong, but it's the influence of Silicon Valley
on
the rest of the world, that it's either this and everything else does not matter. Right. But that's really not the case.
Because we only hear about the unicorns.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, maybe if we bring a different example in, let's say, I don't know, Nike versus some amazing shoe store in, in Netherlands that has a very happy owner, a very happy, factory, and they're doing great job in providing shoes for people, and there's a market for it. Yeah. I like to say there's enough food for everyone. Yeah. You don't have to be in that same.
Is big.
Yeah. So I think that's one of the things that I think culturally needs to shift. Another thing is, I noticed this specifically in biotech companies in Boston, and then the startups over here. In biotech, seen in Boston, this is with regards to the scientists. Scientists can move around from Dana-Farber to Harvard Medical School to MSK and so on, because the competition is high, and they're scientists and they're very good at what they do. They specialize in that, and they will just move around to whoever gives them more money and so on. Same thing is happening here in Armenia as far as the developers go. They will jump around from company to company if they provide them with just even a little bit more money. And it is good for the individual because, they're thinking about, well, this extra money, I'll be able to get more things for my child. I will be able to do this, etc. And it's a very human thing to do. But if you are part of a startup and not a big company, you also want to think about how you are perceived in the industry. You want to think about how you are building yourself in your career. Yeah. You want to think about, okay, maybe I won't make X amount more for the next 3 years, but because I'm one of the first 5 people within this company, I will be able to get percentage. I will be able to get this and that, and at least I'll be able to develop my name as one of the originals within this company who became successful. So that's another cultural shift that I think would be a healthy thing for Armenia, for the Armenian developers, is to just be more committed to the company that they're with. And this goes back to what I'm saying, is being passionate about what they're doing. Yeah. And it's not just, ones and zeros and coding. It's, okay, what is this company doing? Yeah. Do you believe in what they're doing? And do you think you can have positive change on yourself, on your country, on the, other countries, and on society at large? If that is missing, I think, you are bound to move around and just always be unhappy and always chase, monetary success rather than more success that's bigger than yourself.
I think that problem will be fixed, and maybe it's not from a passion perspective, but it'll be fixed as soon as the first Armenian startup exits. Right. And a lot of people become very wealthy overnight, and it'll be the people who stuck around for the full vesting period and got all their stock options, and then when that exit happened, they made a fair amount of money. But until then, there's still, often when I speak with founders, I hear that there's still a sort of like hesitancy towards taking equity and taking stock options, because that culture wasn't really here before that. And some people feel like, no, like screw the stock options, like just pay me more.
Right.
But
what about now? I don't care about the future.
Yeah. Who knows what's going to happen in the future? But once that first exit happens, I think people are going to understand the value of equity very, very quickly.
Right.
Yeah.
Are there any companies right now that are kind of almost exiting that you know of, or?
So in terms of Armenian startups that will probably be the first ones to exit or are on the cusp of exiting. In the news earlier this year was Service Titan, who had reportedly filed for an IPO. Service Titan is one of the biggest tech companies that operate in Armenia. They're based out of Glendale, California. And I have no doubt that they will exit at some point. But given the current state of the markets, especially for tech stocks, I think it's possible that a lot of IPOs will be getting pushed back and delayed. So I have no idea what Service Titan is planning. I have no insider knowledge of that. But I think a lot of tech IPOs are going to get delayed, and maybe it's possible that Service Titans will as well. But we will have to just wait and see.
I've been to their offices, and they're doing amazing work. And I know that all of the employees of Service Titan are doing great work, and just related to exits and so on. I'll give you an example of another company that shall remain nameless, and people who are in the biotech scene, I'm sure they will know who I'm talking about. But the one thing that they have done is, so they got $200 million funding every other year or something like that. Now they're evaluated at $6 billion. We know that they are now filing, getting ready to file to exit. But one thing that has happened is they hired about 1,000 people in like a year or two. And we know that their customers are very unhappy with them because nobody knows the product all the way, because they're hiring so many people. They're focusing more on the perception than the real value that they bring to society. And I think this is a very common, like a Silicon Valley problem, is you go ahead and hire, funding, market, use most of the money that you got from funding on marketing and make it seem like you are the coolest and the best thing in the world. But then when you try to use the product, it's really either the product is underdeveloped, or if the product is very developed, the people that are supposed to give you customer support, they can't.
Right.
Stories that we hear of this company is people, send a question and they say, oh, this is part of this module. Let me bring this specialist in. That specialist comes in, and then you say, okay, but what about this? Then they bring another specialist in. Next thing you know, there's 10 different people in this email chain, and nobody knows the answer to the question that you're asking. And I think this is a common problem in the industry, is that perception versus reality, real value versus what your marketing is providing. And these things are directly correlated with short-term success and long-term success. Are you here to build a company that's going to be here 50 years from now? Or are you here to do something in a couple of years, make a lot of money, exit, and that's it? And I think that people don't think too deep into these things. They're more focused on like the day-to-day grind, and that's understandable.
They're kind of optimizing for the wrong KPIs.
Right.
Like, number of employees is not something to be optimizing for.
Right.
It doesn't mean that your company is doing as well as it might seem like it's doing.
Right.
I kind of thought that problem might be going away with the advent of, like, 10, 15 years ago, let's say 15, social startups were all anybody really did. And it was super easy to get off the ground. That's why you had so many college dropouts starting companies and things. Nowadays, I feel like the startups that we hear about, the most prominent startups, the ones that get financing, the ones that grow, are these deep tech startups that are built on some proprietary IP that was done through significant scientific research or real R&D work. And that's not easy to replicate. And it's also not easy to get started in that space. And I thought that would filter out a lot of that hype and bullshit. But do you think that even in the biotech scene, which is purely deep tech, there's still a lot of that?
I think there's definitely still a lot of that, because it's part of the system.
Right,
It's part of
yeah.
the ecosystem, so you can't help but have that.
Yeah.
So if I can talk about our competitors a bit. First of all, I want to thank the competitors because they make our product better.
Right.
And let's say 5 years ago we had, let's say, 10 competitors. Now we have 85. Now the question is, how much of these 85 are BS and how much of them are legit? Some of them are legit on very specific features, others on others, but I would say now we've narrowed it down to, let's say, 5 that we pay attention to.
Yeah.
The rest, they're not even close. And a lot of these are fluffy companies because they found this niche. They realized that there is something in here, and then they just went ahead and created some software that will compete. And they have small market share, 1.1% or something like that. And for them, that's enough. And they make their money and they move on. But others are very focused on being acquired by other larger companies to be in that space. There has been a lot of big biotech companies that develop their own software, so they were providing centrifuges and things like that, and they just developed their own software just to compete and be able to use their own equipment. The problem with that is that they were not agnostic. They became you have to use their product and their software, or else you can't use it, and it becomes very proprietary and not easy to scale. So yes, we notice fluff in the industry, but those original 10 that were our competitors 5 years ago, that narrowed down into 5, and from 5 there's usually 2 or 3 that are always ending up on the competing table.
Right.
So what happens is these large institutions will put up a RFP, request for purchase, and they will create a committee. Internally, we call them a DMU, decision-making unit. And this committee will make a large list of their requirements.
Right.
These are IT requirements. These are functional requirements. So they will have end users. They will have IT. They will have directors of research, all having their pain points just thrown on a piece of paper. I mean, including like dreams. I would like to be able to press a button and it does all of the science for me.
Right.
Like to that level. I make a joke. I said, do you want this software to also order pizza and coffee for you?
That might be more doable.
Right. So they create these large RFPs, and then they put it out to make it also a non-biased decision, because hey, I might be friends with AstraZeneca guy, and he said, hey, my friend has a company, let's go. It's not fair. It needs to be something that benefits everyone and everybody likes it. These RFPs get put out, and usually it ends up being us, Benchling and LabGuru, so eLabNext, Benchling, and LabGuru, and then everybody else.
Yeah.
And then it goes through this evaluation where we give a demo, we give them all these different papers, and the sales cycle can be anywhere from a couple of months to a couple of years. Mm-hmm. The longest sales cycle I've had was 2 years. Can you believe it? And during that time, it's like every month you would go in and you would speak with a different department, and you will pitch, you will show your product. They will say, wait, you know what, we don't like this feature, can you change it? And then you go into the drawing board and say, you know what, maybe we need to be agile and we need to change our product a bit. And it becomes this collaboration with that organization. That's how I look at it.
Right.
And in the end, for the most part, we end up beating our competition. Honestly, the only times that we don't, if they want something very niche and very specific that they specialize in.
Got it.
Yeah. So one of the ways that we differentiated us in the industry is that we created a marketplace, kind of like an app store, and this app store houses a bunch of different products that we don't want to reinvent the wheel on and build it in-house, because there's other companies that do them and they do them very well. So we were able to create this platform where these third-party companies can come in, work with us, and understand what is the value that they can bring to our customers, and build that using our API and SDK, our software development kit. So, and that's the reason initially when I was saying that we are a digital lab platform rather than just a tool, is because of this reason. And one thing that I would love to, for the listeners who are in this space to know, is that we're very open to working with these kind of startups that have an amazing tool for the biotech scene, and we will be able to integrate them into our program, and they will be able to be presented to thousands of users that we have around the world. I mean, to give you an idea, one of our accounts, just one account that we have, has 3,000 users alone. So, and we have thousands of accounts. So their benefit would be for them to be presented to the world and kind of have a accelerated market entry where they don't have to, cold call and do all that fun stuff. And our benefit is that we get to say, hey, look, all these amazing tools that we have. So it's really a win-win solution. And this is how we differentiated us in the industry. And I hope that any of the listeners that are part of the scene and have these tools can reach out and work with us on that.
Okay, Zareh, let's get to our last question.
Sure.
Where do you hope to see, both for yourself in your career at eLabNext, or at eLab, sorry, but also for Armenia's biotech scene? Where do you hope to see all this in the next 5 to 10 years?
Sure. So with eLabNext, so currently I'm the head of eLabNext Americas, so that's US, Canada, and Latin America. Right now we have a couple of offices in Boston, and we're working on opening up more offices in the West Coast, in Canada. Latin America is an untapped kind of market. We're getting more and more people from there, and more research labs opening up, which is very good to see, especially research on agriculture and animals for obvious reasons. So, for the next 5 to 10 years is really developing all of these sectors.
Yeah.
And kind of to transition to the second part of the question, there's a lot of amazing talent here in Armenia. And from a business and capitalistic perspective, it makes sense for us to hire people from here because we're paying less and getting higher quality than other parts of the world. So I would like to be able to hire more people from here. These would be developers. These would be even graphic designers and marketing and so on. So any operational folks that are highly qualified, we'd love to tap into that. And maybe one day we'll be able to have enough people from here that will open up an office here as well. That's really just an excuse for me to be able to come back and have more kebabs here and khorovats. So that's the only reason I want that.
How can people reach out to you if they want?
Sure. So you guys can reach out to me on LinkedIn. Just search Zareh Zurabyan, ZarehZurabyan. And I'm sure those will be written on the podcast,
yes,
right? Okay, it's okay. And maybe we can put my email in there as well,
sure.
and people can reach out. And whether you guys want mentorship, whether you want to just talk, whether you want to integrate your product into our software, these are all things that I'd be more than happy to discuss with anyone from here.
Awesome. Zareh, thank you so much for your time today.
You.
It was a really interesting conversation.
This was great. Thanks. Bye-bye.